Hello, thank you for watching my channel today. My name is Sarah and my channel is called Your True Self. Today I am filming a wrap-up video because I realised that I never actually did a wrap-up video for the month of February and it's now halfway through March. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk about the books that I've read in February and the ones I've read thus far in March so that we've got a decent wrap-up length because I didn't read that much in February. I think that's probably all we'll have time for because I don't want to make the video too long. It's beautiful today. It's like spring has arrived. It's so sunny and lovely. And I have a very nice tea today. I have a gingerbread chai from Bawden blend and I do like putting milk in with this and it's really, really nice. So let's get started. So the first book I read seems like absolutely ages ago that I read this and I got it from the library. I haven't got it anymore. And this is The Gallows Poll by Benjamin Myers, which was our book club choice for work in February. So this is a book which is a true story but a fictionalized version, so the characters really existed and the events really happened, and it's set in Yorkshire in Hebden Bridge, and it's set, I really can't remember the year now, but I think it's the 1700s, I think, and it's basically about coin clipping. So coin clipping is like where you clip bits off genuine coins, you melt them down and then you use the melted down material to make new coins. So you're basically sort of forging money, and it was a crime punishable by death. But the people who were doing this, so the leader was a guy who named himself King David. He wasn't obviously a king, but he was sort of called himself like the king of the area in Yorkshire, and he had sort of like a group of people that he trusted who were all doing the same. And it's basically like about how the times were so grim then to live in. Like people were starving to death. There was like really, really poor hygiene. There was just, everything was just working yourself to death basically. And people were kind of sick of the fact that the landowners had so much wealth and money, and they really didn't care about the people who lived on their land at all. And so it was just kind of about an investigation that happened, and they knew that their crime was punished by death. There's a lot of kind of violence in there because the people who were doing the clipping like sort of often get into like sort of fights, and if anyone talks, stuff will happen to them and stuff like that. So it was a really dark, kind of grim book, but it was enjoyable. But it just made you think, thank goodness that we don't live then, because it was just grim. So I think I gave that one 3 stars in the end, but it's a while since I read it now. After that, I read, this was a brilliant book. So I picked this one for my old book of my TBR, and this is All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven, which is a YA book. The reason I picked this up was because I watched the film, which has Elle Fanning in, and I really enjoyed the film and I loved this book. This book was brilliant. I don't know if many people have read this. It came out in so it was published in 2015, so it's not that old, but I haven't seen it mentioned on BookTube, but it's so good. It deals with quite serious themes. So basically it's about two young people called Violet and Finch, and both of them take alternate viewpoints, alternate chapters in this book. And Violet has lost her sister to a car crash, and so she is very much sort of grieving, and her life got turned upside down. She's quite low in mood and she doesn't want to get into a car anymore, so she cycles everywhere, and she's now an only child. And Finch has a mum who's very absent, and he's kind of being raised by his slightly older sister. And his dad, he sees his dad, but his dad beats him physically, and his parents are separated. His dad has a new family now, and he's never good enough for his dad. And it becomes apparent through the book that Finch has a mental illness, and I felt that he probably had bipolar. And Violet, the book starts with Violet climbing up to the top of the kind of a bell tower at school, and she's kind of thinking, should she jump? And then Finch is up there and saves her from jumping, but everyone thinks that at school that Finch is really weird, and they think that she saved him. So anyway, this starts off them getting to know each other and how they help each other. And there's a really strong theme of teen mental illness and teen suicide in this book. So that is obviously a trigger warning for people, but I think it's done so well. I thought this was an absolutely outstanding book, and I would very much recommend it, and the film is wonderful. Then I listened to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. So I picked this one up because I heard Jessie from Bow Ties and Books talk about this a while ago now, and they absolutely loved this. And so I wanted to give it a read, and I found it on Audible, and I thought it was really good. So this is about Addie LaRue, who is born in... gosh, the years just merely I think it's like 1600s in France, and she is living in a village where she's just expected to marry who her parents tell her to marry, have a load of kids, and then that's kind of her life. And she doesn't want to do that. She doesn't want to marry the man that her family want her to marry. And she decides to like run away and hide in the woods so she doesn't have to get married. And then she keeps praying to the gods that she doesn't have to do it. And then one of the gods appears to her, who she calls the Darkness, and she decides to make a deal with him. And she doesn't really go into the specific terms of the deal, and she makes a deal that she can live forever, but what she doesn't realise at the time is that nobody will ever remember her. So for instance, if she goes back to her family, they won't have a clue who she is. If she is with somebody and they then leave the room and come back in, they'll be like, who are you and why are you in my house? She can't form any friendships, she can't form any like romantic relationships or anything, because nobody can remember her. And then one day somebody does remember her, and so we follow two time periods, one in sort of 1700 France and one in New York in the modern day, and her interactions with the Darkness and with the person who remembers her. And I really loved the story. I thought it was great. Like at times I thought maybe it was a tiny bit too long in places, but I thought it was fantastically done. It was my first V.E. Schwab, and I would definitely like to read more by her because I thought Addie LaRue was brilliant. And if you want a kind of a fantasy that's set in the real world and which has like romance and history and things like that, then I would definitely recommend that. So the next book that I read, this was good. So this is my first John Gwynne. This is an epic fantasy called The Shadow of the Gods, and it's the first in a trilogy called the Bloodsworn trilogy. This is the only book that's out, but the second book is coming out in April, so I'm really excited for that. So this book is going to be a bit tricky to describe. We are following, so this is a Nordic fantasy, and it's set historically, and I'm going to try and describe it for you. So we're following three different points of view. So three people from three different war bands. So we're following Orca, who is she is a wife and a mother to a young son. And people in her village are starting to disappear and being murdered. And they are her and her husband and her son are setting out to try and work out what's going on. And Orca's a really good fighter, and she's very strong and independent. And then there's another woman called Elva. Elva is part of a war band called the Battle Grim. And then there is Varg, who is an escaped slave, and he is out on his own, but he gets picked up by the Bloodsworn Battle, the Bloodsworn Battle Tribe, who he wants to join, and he wants to try and avenge the death of his sister. And he wants to, using the magic system, there are certain people who can, called Sether Witches, who can bring back the last moments of someone's life so that he can find out who killed his sister and avenge her death. So they're the kind of three different stories we hear from alternate viewpoints, and I'm not going to kind of tell you how they interact with each other because it would be a spoiler, but there's loads of bits which are left unresolved at the end of this book, because obviously there's the next book to come after that. So I thought this was really good. It's what I would say is it's because of the time period and the sort of Norse setting, it is very violent. There's a lot of battles, and because of the time, it's all like hand-to-hand combat with things like axes and swords and shields, so it is bloody and gruesome, but you get to know the characters really well. You get invested in the characters and care about them and want to know their stories. The only criticism I have is there is no character list. Apparently for book 2 there is a character list, but I had to have this like little bit of paper which I had in the book, and I was like making notes on there of who was in which battle tribe, and because the names are also like Norse names, so it was kind of harder even to get a handle on it to start with, but then I was okay with it. So anyway, I thought this was excellent. I gave this 5 stars, and I cannot wait for the next one to come out. After that, I read a couple of books for I read 2 that we could count for Dawathon, and they could also both count for middle grade March. So the first one was this one. This is a tiny little book, which was another TBR vet for me, and this is The Peppermint Pig by Nina Bawden. Nina Bawden lived in Wales for some time after she was evacuated there in the Second World War, and that's why this could count for Dabathon. So this is a children's book, which I was a little bit disappointed with actually, because I really liked Carrie's War by Nina Bawden, and this one, I'm sure I read it as a child, but I can't actually remember it. I can't remember the plot. But basically, it's about a little girl called Pole and her brother Theo, and their father has left and gone abroad, and they are having to leave their sort of quite luxurious life in London and go and live in Norfolk, which is quite funny because that's where I live. And basically, they get a little pig, and it's about their lives in Norfolk and how they change, and also about the pig as well. And I would say this book contains some quite difficult themes for children, is what I would say. It's quite sad in places, and I just didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to, so I'm just going to move on and say that it was good. I think it was a 3-star book, but I had higher hopes, which is a bit of a shame. The next book I'm going to have a really unpopular opinion on, I'm afraid. So the next book is a really one which everybody seems to love, and it's Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones, and I'm really sorry, but I just didn't enjoy this book. So everybody loves Howl's Moving Castle. It's got really high ratings on Storygraph and on Goodreads, but for me it was not an enjoyable read, and I kept going with it because I thought, well, everyone loves this book so much, surely it's going to become a favourite for me. But no. So this basically follows a little girl, or she's not a little actually, she's a young woman called Sophie, and she is the eldest of 3 sisters, and she lives with her stepmum who has a hat business, and the stepmum decides to, after the dad, I think the dad dies and they haven't got enough money to keep her at her school, so Sophie is to stay on at the hat business, and her 2 sisters get sent off to other people to learn trades. And so there's a castle which moves around the landscape, and there's someone called the wizard Howl who lives in the castle, and it's said that he steals hearts from young girls, but actually what it means is, instead of actually killing girls and taking their hearts, it means he actually wants them to fall in love with him. And it's basically, Sophie decides to run away because she gets sick of this life unpaid in the hat shop, and she runs away and dives into Howl's Moving Castle and basically ends up living there. I found the characters were very two-dimensional. I felt like I didn't really care about any of them. I felt that I didn't get to know them particularly. I felt that it was plot focused but not that fast paced. some of it was a bit scary for young children. Like there was like a scary scarecrow and things like that in there. Then there was magic and things. So it's got all the elements of making a good story. But if you want a story with like children and magic and things, something like Nevermore is so much better. And I just didn't find this enjoyable. I'm so sorry, because everyone gives this like 5 stars, and there's some ratings on Storygraph of people who've like read it 4 or 5 times in a year. And I just don't get it. It wasn't for me. I haven't watched the anime adaptation of this, but I'm really sorry, but it was a flat book for me and I didn't enjoy it. Then I needed to move on to something which was going to be better for me. So the next book I read was from my borrowed list, and so this was lent to me by my best friend, and this was Letters on Motherhood by Giovanna Fletcher. Giovanna Fletcher is a presenter, writer, podcaster, actor in the UK, and everybody loves her. She's lovely. She's got 3 little boys, and she's married to a singer who's in the band McFly. And this is a really gorgeous book. So I flew through this book, and it's full of photos as well. But it's basically each chapter is a letter to either one of her children, or there's like a letter to her phone, there's a letter to her body, there's a letter to her husband. So there's letters to her parents, and it's just talking about like little things that have happened in her life, and memories, and what it's like in the really good times, the really difficult times, and all different things like that. And it was really moving, and it really captures the feelings that you have as a mum, and I could relate to it loads, and I love G, and I really, really enjoyed this book and gave it 5 stars. Then we have 2 more, both of which were fantastic. So Milkman by Anna Burns is one that I listened to on Audible for the Irish Readathon, and I had heard lots of people say, if you're going to read this book, listen to it. And I think that was definitely the right advice, because I've got the physical book, but if you look at it, it's basically like 1 paragraph for the whole book. And if you listen to it, not only do you get the amazing Northern Irish accents, but you also get pauses, and it's read so well. The narrator makes me laugh so many times of how she reads certain bits, and some of the characters do these sort of fairly big monologues, and she puts so much into them that I just think it would be such a much better experience than reading it personally. But anyway, I'll tell you about what the book is. So it's set in 1970s Belfast, and it's all focused on none of the characters have names. So our main character, we don't know her name, so they're referred to as like mother, father, maybe boyfriend, wee sisters, older sister, brother-in-law, that kind of thing. But that's fine. You don't then have to go, who is that again, because they tell you who they are in their titles. That was absolutely fine. Milkman is this basically man who is thought to be a paramilitary leader, and he keeps approaching our protagonist, and he knows a lot about her, and so the community is very close-knit and very gossipy, and so everyone starts saying to her, like, why are you hanging around with Milkman? Why are you having an affair with him? Don't you know he's married? Why are you putting yourself in this position? Like, and everyone's talking about her, and she's like, I'm not having an affair with him. He literally just keeps coming up to me, and he knows all about me, and she kind of feels like forced to go along with whatever he wants, and he's actually she's not doing anything. It's just the community doesn't believe her. But also there's all of the all the intricate relationships in the family and the community. Obviously it's hugely focused on the Protestant Catholic divide, and it's just a really shocking, like, how many deaths there were, how much danger there was, how restrictive everything was, and how you could even get in trouble for like watching the wrong film that's kind of from that's like British instead of like Irish, or just like loads of stuff. And our main character, she likes walking everywhere, and when she walks she always reads, and she gets criticised so much for reading. She's like the girl who reads and walks, and people think she's really weird for that, and they're saying, well, Milkman's probably only approaching you because you're the girl who reads and walks and you're not paying attention to your surroundings. And it's just, there's so much like humour in this book, as well as the really serious stuff, like the day-to-day interactions between the family, between friends and stuff. They're just so amusing in so many ways, and like I said, the accents are just absolutely gorgeous. Like, my voice in my head, I kept thinking in a Northern Irish accent because I was listening to it so much that it kind of made my thoughts with a Northern Irish accent. But I just loved it. I loved it. It's an absolute work of genius in my opinion. It's definitely worth 5 stars. It's definitely worth winning the prize. And I just thought, was it even, no, it was the Booker Prize she won, wasn't it? I don't know if she won the Women's Prize, I can't remember. She won the Booker Prize, but it was absolutely phenomenal and I loved it, and I couldn't recommend it high enough, but I would say, like other people, go for the Audible version. And then finally, the first Women's Prize for Fiction of this year book that I completed, which was The Bread the Devil Knead. This was another amazing book. So far, I've finished one Women's Prize book, and I've got book 2 and 3, which I'm currently reading, and so far they're all fantastic. So let's focus on this book. This is the one I've finished. So this is a book that I read on my Kindle, and we are following a woman called Alicia Lopez. And she is just turning 40, and she has had a traumatic life, to say the least. Very traumatic life. There are trigger warnings big time in this book. So trigger warnings for rape, domestic violence and sexual abuse. I will just put that out there. If those things are going to trigger you, do not read this book. So we cut between Alicia and present day and some sort of smaller parts of Alicia as a kid and what happened to her as a kid, and that sort of continues through the book. So we find out why things are as they are in the present day, and it's in Jamaica, and Alicia works in a clothing store, and she's the manager. She's having an affair with her boss, and who is married, and she lives with a guy called Leo, and Leo is very abusive, like physically to her. He beats her up all the time, and she's been with him for 5 years. And he'll go from like being really, really nice, really, really sorry, to like she does the smallest thing and he just beats her up again. And he also rapes her. And so this is kind of her life, and she's not confiding in anybody apart from, she confides in one person, and then everyone's like, well, why are you with him? And because she's had relationships that have always been abusive, then she finds it really hard to be like, well, isn't this just how men are, sort of thing. And she says she loves Leo. So it's basically following her life from the past, from now, and watching her develop. There is a lot of character development in this book. There is a lot of stuff that happens. It's quite a small book, but I absolutely loved it. I thought the writing was great. It's written with some dialect as well. It's really interesting to see how complicated relationships and past histories make a person and their current opinions. And another 5-star book for me. I thought was fantastic, and I'd highly recommend that one. So this has been a really long wrap up. I didn't realise I was going to talk for quite such a long time, so I apologise, and I hope you made it all the way to the end. Well done if you did. Let me know if you've read any of those books, if you have any thoughts on amongst the ones that I've discussed, and just in general, if there's any books that you want to talk to me about, that would be lovely. I hope you have a lovely week, and I'll see you all soon. Bye bye.